My son sold their house and gave $620,000 for my daughter-in-law to spend. Then, they came to live in my house. I said no. And my daughter-in-law slapped me across the face. That very same day, I called my lawyer. When they received the subpoena, my hands were shaking, but my heart felt stronger than ever. I'm glad you're here. Follow my story until the end, and tell me in the comments, what would you have done if this happened to you? My name is Bessie. I'm 64 years old. And I thought I knew my son. I thought I understood the man I raised, the boy I sacrificed everything for. But that Tuesday morning in October changed everything I believed about family, loyalty, and the child I brought into this world. I was in my garden, tending to my late-blooming roses, when I heard the car pull into my driveway. The sound was familiar, Terrence's SUV. But something felt different. The way the doors slammed, the tension in the air. I wiped my hands on my gardening apron and walked to the front yard. There stood my son, Terrence, with his wife Lennox, and 2 huge suitcases. He was dragging more bags from the trunk. Mom, Terrence's voice cracked. We need to talk. I studied his face. My son looked exhausted, broken. His tie crooked, dark circles under his eyes. And Lennox? She looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine. Perfectly styled, expensive outfit, flawless hair, and a sharpness in her eyes that made my stomach twist. What's going on? I asked, unlocking the front door. Is everything all right? Inside, their footsteps echoed against my hardwood floors. Lennox's gaze roamed across my modest living room, my furniture, my decorations, like she was taking inventory. Calculating. Mom, Terrence sank into my husband's old recliner, the one no one else dared to sit in after he passed. We sold the house. Those words, they didn't just hang in the air. They punched the breath right out of me. I set my coffee cup down slowly, carefully, like if I moved too fast, the world would shatter. Which house? My voice was barely a whisper, though deep down, I already knew. Our house. Maple Street. The house I helped them buy. The house I put $40,000 of my retirement savings into. The house where I painted walls until my back ached, planted gardens Lennox never appreciated. You sold it? My voice broke. Why didn't you tell me? Lennox finally spoke, her tone sharp, cold. We didn't need permission, Bessie. It was our house. Her words slithered into me like poison. I nodded slowly. Yes, but you told me you'd raise your family there. You said it was perfect. Terrence shifted, looking anywhere but my eyes. Plans change, Mom. How much? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. $620,000, Lennox said proudly, like it was a trophy. My chest tightened. That was more money than I had seen in a decade of hard work. That's wonderful, I managed, trying to stay calm. So, where are you moving? Did you buy a bigger place? Silence. Terrence stared at his hands. Lennox checked her nails. Finally, Terrence muttered, actually, we were hoping we could stay here. Just temporarily. Stay here? Yes, just a few months. I froze. My heart dropped. My son had over $500,000 just weeks ago, and now he was at my door, homeless. What happened to the money? My voice was sharp now. Lennox smirked. I had expenses. What kind of expenses? Personal things. Personal? Lennox, you just had $620,000. What could possibly? jewelry, clothes, a spa trip to California. Paid off my credit cards. Oh, and I invested $300,000 in my friend's boutique. It's going to be huge. The room spun. Over $500,000, gone. Just like that. I looked at my son. His shoulders slumped, his eyes hollow. The boy I raised was gone. Terrence, how much debt? He swallowed. 80,000. Credit cards. 80,000? My voice cracked. Clothes, vacations, handbags. Before we married. My blood ran cold. So this was it. This was the truth. And still, they sat there, waiting for me to save them. No, my voice was calm now. Steady. You can't stay here. The air froze. Terrence's face crumbled. Lennox's mask slipped, revealing a cold, calculating glare. Mom, you can't be serious, Terrence whispered. I am. Lennox slammed her phone on the table. Your son made business decisions. Not every investment pays off right away. Business decisions? I snapped. Blowing $600,000 on handbags and spas isn't business. It's destruction. Lennox's composure cracked. You wouldn't understand, Bessie. You've lived in this tiny old house your whole life, wearing the same clothes, driving the same car. You have no standards. I stood tall. No, Lennox. I have standards. I don't spend other people's money and then expect to be rescued when it's gone. Her face twisted. You're just jealous. Your son chose me over you. He loves me more than he'll ever love you. That was the moment something inside me snapped. Get out. Lennox's scream rattled the walls. We're not going anywhere. Terrence, tell her we're staying. Terrence looked torn, broken, but said nothing. Neighbors gathered outside. Lennox threw open my front door and screamed for the whole street to hear. Do you see what kind of mother she is? Throwing her own son out like garbage. My neighbors froze, whispering. And right there, I knew this war wasn't just inside my home anymore. It had just spilled out, into the world. Tears now streamed down her face. Tears that I was certain were nothing but calculated. All we need is just a place to stay while we get back on our feet, Lennox cried. And this heartless woman said no to her own child. I stood in my doorway, frozen, humiliated. My quiet street, the street I had lived on for 15 years, where every neighbor respected me, was now an open theater for this ugly performance. That's when I snapped. That's enough, I said, stepping out onto my porch. But Lennox spun around, eyes blazing. No, it's not enough. You think you're better than everyone else? You're just a selfish, bitter old woman who can't stand to see anyone else happy. My jaw tightened. Lennox, stop this right now. Why? She hissed. Because you're embarrassed? Good. You should be embarrassed. And then, she did something that changed everything. In front of my neighbors, in front of God himself. Lennox Mitchell raised her hand and slapped me across the face. The sound cracked through the air like a gunshot. I staggered back. My hand flew to my cheek, not from pain, but from sheer shock. For a moment, nobody moved. Even Lennox seemed stunned by her own action. Mrs. Patterson gasped so loudly the whole block heard it. The Johnsons' teenage son, who had been mowing his lawn, shut off the mower and stood frozen. Even the mail carrier stopped his truck and stared. I looked at my son. My son. Surely he would defend me. Surely he would speak. But Terrence just stood there, confused, overwhelmed, and silent. Did you just hit me? My voice was low, steady, though rage burned in my chest. Lennox lifted her chin. You deserved it. Throwing your own family out on the street like trash. I looked around. Dozens of eyes on me. Witnesses. Every neighbor I had ever greeted was now watching my humiliation. Terrence, I whispered, voice shaking. Your wife just assaulted me in front of the entire neighborhood. And you're going to stand there and let her? He opened his mouth. Closed it again. Then whispered, Mom, she's upset. She didn't mean to slap me in the face? Before he could answer, Lennox stepped between us. Don't twist this, Bessie. Don't make this about you being a victim. You brought this on yourself. I stared at her. This woman, who had drained my son's finances, who had manipulated him until he couldn't even see straight, who had just humiliated me in front of my neighbors, was trying to paint me as the villain. Get off my property, I said, my voice sharp as ice. Lennox sneered. Make me. I turned to Terrence one last time, hoping for a shred of the boy I once knew. But all I saw was a man so thoroughly broken, so deeply manipulated, he couldn't even defend his own mother. You have 5 minutes, I said coldly. 5 minutes to get your bags and leave, or I'm calling the police. You wouldn't dare, Lennox spat. But her eyes flickered with doubt. I pulled my phone from my pocket. My fingers didn't even shake as I dialed 911. As the line rang, Lennox's face shifted from arrogance to panic. She grabbed Terrence's arm. Tell your mother to hang up right now, she hissed. But it was too late. I was already speaking to the dispatcher. Calmly. Professionally. I need officers at my address. Trespassers on my property. One of them has become violent. When I hung up, Lennox stared at me in disbelief. You actually called the police on your own son? No, I said evenly. I called the police on the woman who assaulted me in front of half the neighborhood. For the first time since I had known her. Lennox looked afraid. The police arrived in 10 minutes, though it felt like hours. Officer Martinez, young, professional, kind eyes. Officer Thompson, older, weary, the kind of man who had seen family dramas like this before. By the time they stepped out of their car, Lennox had composed herself. She had fixed her hair. Straightened her clothes. But the panic was still in her eyes. Terrence stood beside the luggage, looking like a little boy who had just lost his way. Ma'am, Officer Martinez said, approaching me first. We received a call about an assault. Yes, I said. I touched my cheek, still stinging. This woman slapped me. Officer Thompson turned to Lennox. Is this true, ma'am? She was being unreasonable. Lennox snapped, as if that justified violence. We just needed a place to stay. She threw us out like strangers. That doesn't give you the right to put hands on anyone, Officer Martinez replied firmly. She turned back to me. Do you want to press charges? I looked at my son. My heart begged him to speak. To stand beside me. To defend his mother. But Terrence said nothing. Nothing. Yes, I whispered. I want to press charges. Lennox's face drained of color. You can't be serious. "Ma'am," Officer Thompson said, "assault is a serious charge. And we have multiple witnesses." He turned toward the crowd. Mrs. Patterson nodded vigorously. "I saw it all." She hit Bessie across the face. "Unprovoked. This is ridiculous." Lennox screamed. "She's my mother-in-law. This is a family dispute." Officer Martinez shook her head. "Family or not, assault is assault. You'll need to come with us." As they led Lennox toward the patrol car, she twisted around, shrieking, "Terrence! Don't just stand there. Do something!" But Terrence stood frozen, watching as his wife, his arrogant, manipulative wife, was placed in handcuffs on his mother's front lawn. "Mom," he finally croaked. His eyes were accusing. "Did you really have to?" "Yes," I said firmly. "I really had to. Your wife slapped me in front of this entire neighborhood. And you did nothing. You are my son. She is your wife. But apparently, neither title means anything to you anymore." Officer Thompson approached, clipboard in hand. "Mrs. Mitchell, we'll need you to come down to the station to give a formal statement. Can you do that this afternoon?" "Of course," I said. As the police car pulled away, Terrence loaded his bags back into his SUV. Slowly, like a man moving through water. "Where will you go?" I asked quietly. He shrugged. "Maybe a hotel." "With what money?" I asked softly. The silence told me everything. "Terrence," I said, "this doesn't have to be the end. If you leave her, if you admit this is wrong, we can fix this. We can rebuild." He looked at me, his eyes tired. "She's my wife, Mom. I can't abandon her. She abandoned you the moment she spent your future on handbags and spa trips. It's not that simple." "Yes, it is." He climbed into the SUV, drove away, leaving me standing on my porch, alone. That night at the police station, I gave my full statement. Detective Reynolds asked me something that cut deep. "Mrs. Mitchell, is this the first time your daughter-in-law has been aggressive with you?" "Yes, physically," I admitted. "But emotionally? She's been manipulating us for years." I told the detective everything, the isolation, the skipped holidays, the twisted lies. And then I remembered the house. Maple Street. The $40,000 I gave them from my retirement. The paperwork. I rushed to my file cabinet. My hands trembled as I pulled out the folder. And there it was, the promissory note. $40,000. At 5% annual interest. Secured against the property. And they had sold the house, without paying me back. The next morning, I was in James Crawford's office. My old attorney. A man with silver hair and sharp eyes. "Bessie," he said after listening to everything. "Do you understand? You have legal recourse. Significant recourse." "What do you mean?" I whispered. That $40,000 note was secured. When your son sold the house without paying it, that was breach of contract. You can sue for the loan, for interest, for damages, and possibly for theft. My heart pounded. I don't want to destroy my son's life. James leaned forward. Sometimes, the kindest thing you can do for someone you love is stop protecting them from consequences. That night, I thought of Terrence as a boy. His little hands. His tears at his father's funeral. The promises he once made to me. And by morning, my decision was made. I filed the lawsuit. Against both of them. And then I changed my locks. Installed cameras. My home would not be vulnerable again. That afternoon, Terrence called. His voice was shaky. Mom. Lennox made bail. We need to talk. No, I said. She's sorry. No. Your wife stole $40,000 from me, then assaulted me. There is nothing to talk about. What do you mean, stole $40,000? I explained. The loan. The lien. The lawsuit. On the other end of the line, silence stretched long and cold. Mom, Terrence finally whispered. You can't sue us. We're family. You're right, I said quietly. We were family. And that's why it hurts more. You sold that house and ignored a debt. That's theft. How much? $60,000. With interest and damages. We don't have that kind of money. You should have thought of that before you let her burn through everything you owned. Mom, please, can't we work something out? You mean, like the original loan agreement you ignored? More silence. Where are you staying? I asked. A motel. Cheapest we could find. Maybe a week. 2 weeks if we're careful. And then? I don't know, Mom. For a moment, my heart cracked. My baby sounded so lost. But then, I remembered her hand across my face. Terrence, I whispered. I love you. I always will. But I will not be stolen from, manipulated, or assaulted. You need to choose. Your wife, or your mother. Because right now, you can't have both. I hung up. And as the sun set over my quiet neighborhood, I knew tomorrow would bring consequences. 3 days later, my attorney called. Bessie, James said grimly. My investigator dug into Lennox's past. You need to hear this. And what he told me chilled my blood. I'm done being stolen from and assaulted. Mom, please, can't we work something out? Maybe we can. No, Terrence, I said firmly. The time for working things out was 3 years ago, when you first missed a payment on the promissory note. Or 6 months ago, when you decided to sell the house. Or last week, when you showed up at my door after squandering over $500,000. The time for compromise has long passed. What do you want us to do? We're living in a motel. I want you to get jobs. Both of you. And start taking responsibility for the mess you've made. Lennox can't work, he said quietly. She's never had a job. Then it's time for her to learn, I snapped. You don't understand, Mom. She's not capable of working some minimum wage job. His voice faltered. She's what, Terrence? Too good to work? Too special to contribute to her own survival? The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, he spoke, voice almost broken. She says she'll countersue. For emotional distress or something. I almost laughed. Let her try. I have witnesses to her assaulting me. And I have documentation of every dollar she stole. What does she have? There was muffled shouting in the background. More screaming. Then Terrence returned to the line, sounding exhausted. She wants to know why you're doing this to us. Because you both need to learn that actions have consequences. And Terrence, there's something else you need to know about your wife. What? I hesitated. This was it. The moment of truth. The moment I would either save my son or lose him forever. She's been having an affair. The silence that followed stretched on so long I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. What did you say? Terrence's voice was hollow. Lennox has been having an affair for at least 6 months. With a wealthy, married man. She's been using your money to fund their relationship. That's not true. It is true. My attorney hired an investigator. We have proof. You hired someone to spy on my wife? I hired someone to find out where $600,000 went. The affair was just what we discovered in the process. The phone went quiet again. Then suddenly, I heard Lennox's voice sharp and panicked. What is she saying? What lies is she telling you about me? She says you're having an affair, Terrence said, his voice cracking. What came next was explosive. Screaming. Denials. Accusations. Threats. She called me every name in the book, and a few I'd never even heard before. Terrence, I said quietly, cutting through the chaos. Ask her about Richard Hawthorne. The screaming stopped. Just like that. Who is Richard Hawthorne? Terrence asked slowly. Ask your wife, I replied. There was muffled arguing in the background. Then Terrence's voice again, shaky. She says she doesn't know anyone by that name. He's 52. Owns a construction company. Drives a black Mercedes. He's been paying for her jewelry and spa trips for months. His wife found out about the affair last week and forced him to end it. The phone went silent again. Almost a full minute passed. Terrence? Are you there? How do you know all this? Because I hired professionals. And what we discovered is that your wife has been systematically destroying your life to fund an affair with a married man who just dumped her. She's saying it's not true. Of course she is. What did you expect her to say? She's crying now, isn't she? Manipulating you again? Mom. I can't. I need to think. Then think about this, Terrence. Think about how she convinced you to sell your house behind my back, even though I had a legal stake in the property. Think about how she burned through $600,000 in a matter of months. Think about how she slapped your own mother in front of the entire neighborhood and then expected you to defend her. I'm hanging up now, Terrence. Wait. But the line went dead. I sat in my kitchen, staring at the phone, wondering if I had just saved my son or lost him forever. Either way, I had told him the truth. What he did with that truth was up to him. The next morning, James Crawford, my attorney, called. Bessie, he said. Your son contacted my office. He wants to meet. Meet? About what? He didn't say. But he sounded different. Defeated maybe. Or awakened. It's hard to tell. We arranged to meet at James's office that afternoon. I arrived early. My hands shook. My stomach churned. When Terrence finally walked in, I barely recognized him. He'd always been thin, but now he looked gaunt. His clothes hung loosely. Dark circles framed his eyes. He looked 10 years older than he was. Hello, Mom, he said softly. Hello, Terrence. James sat behind his desk, pen in hand, legal pad ready. "Terrence," he said. "You said you wanted to discuss the lawsuit." "I want to know," Terrence replied. "I want to see all the evidence of what my wife has done." For the next hour, James laid it all out. The affair with Richard Hawthorne, documented through hotel receipts and credit card charges. The so-called boutique investment that was nothing more than funneling money to Lennox's friend. The pattern of financial deception stretching back years, credit card debt Terrence never knew about. With every revelation, I watched my son shrink further into his chair. By the time James finished, Terrence was staring at his hands, silent tears streaming down his face. "Where is she now?" I asked gently. "At the motel. She doesn't know I'm here." "What are you going to do, son?" He looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "I don't know, Mom. My whole life, everything I thought I knew about my marriage, about my wife, it's all been a lie. I'm sorry, sweetheart. Truly. But she has been stealing from you for years. Not just spending, stealing. Deceiving. Cheating. And when I tried to warn you, you chose her over me." "I was manipulated," he whispered. "But I'm 35 years old. I should have seen the signs. I should have questioned why she never worked. Why she always needed more money. Why she was so eager to sell the house." James cleared his throat. "Terrence, the question now is what you want to do about the lawsuit. Your mother is entitled to repayment. But we could work out a plan if—" "No," Terrence interrupted. His voice was steady for the first time. "She deserves to be paid back immediately. All of it. Son, you just said you don't have the money. I'll get it. I'll take out a loan. Work overtime. Sell whatever I have to. Mom, you've been protecting me my whole life. And I repaid you by letting my wife steal from you and assault you. I won't fight the lawsuit. You deserve every penny." Tears blurred my own vision. "And Mom," he said quietly, "I want you to know, I'm filing for divorce today. I can't stay married to someone who's been lying to me about everything." The relief that flooded my chest was overwhelming. "What about Lennox?" I asked cautiously. Terrence's face hardened. "That's not my problem anymore. She made her choices. She can live with the consequences." As we left James's office, we walked together to our cars. At mine, Terrence stopped. His eyes were red, his voice raw. "Mom, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I've hurt you in ways that might not ever be fixable. But I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to make this right." I touched his cheek, just like I did when he was a boy. "You already are, sweetheart. You already are." Driving home, I felt something I hadn't in years. Hope. Hope that maybe I had my son back. But I also knew one thing for certain, Lennox would not go quietly. And I was right. 3 days after Terrence filed for divorce, she came back. At 6 in the morning, pounding on my front door like a woman possessed. Through the peephole, I saw her, disheveled hair, yesterday's clothes, mascara smeared across her face. She looked wild. "Bessie!" she screamed. Loud enough to wake the neighborhood. "I know you're in there. Open this door right now." I didn't move. My new security cameras were recording every second. "You destroyed my marriage," she shrieked. "You turned my husband against me with your lies." Porch lights flicked on. Dogs barked. Neighbors peeked out of windows. I picked up the phone and called 911. "This is Bessie Mitchell. The woman who assaulted me last week is back on my property, causing a disturbance. Please send officers." Minutes later, Officer Martinez and another officer arrived. "Ma'am," Martinez said sharply, "step away from the door." "I'm not doing anything wrong," Lennox wailed. "I'm just trying to talk to my mother-in-law. She's asked you to leave. You need to comply. She's lying about me. She says I had an affair." "Ma'am, are you Lennox Mitchell, the same woman arrested here last week for assault?" "It wasn't assault. It was barely a tap. You slapped Mrs. Mitchell in the face in front of multiple witnesses. That is assault." Her composure shattered. She fell to her knees, sobbing dramatically. "Please, Bessie. I have nowhere to go. Terrence kicked me out. He's filing for divorce. I don't have money. Please don't do this." For a split second, pity tugged at me. But then I remembered Richard Hawthorne. The stolen money. The lies. "Ma'am," Officer Johnson said firmly, lifting her up. "If you come back here again, you'll be arrested for trespassing. You have 5 minutes to leave." After they escorted her away, I called Terrence. "Where is she staying?" I asked. "I don't know," he sighed. "After I filed for divorce, I told her she had to leave the motel. I couldn't pay for both of us anymore. She mentioned her friend, the one with the fake boutique. But honestly, Mom, I don't care. I'm done being responsible for her." I felt a surge of pride. This was my son. The real Terrence. But Lennox wasn't finished. 2 days before our court date, she showed up at my workplace. She looked polished this time. Expensive outfit. Fake confidence. She wanted a scene. "Lennox, you need to leave. This is my workplace." "I just want 5 minutes," she said loudly, making sure my coworkers heard. "We have nothing to discuss. Please, Bessie. I made mistakes, but I don't deserve to have my life destroyed. Let's settle. Let's make it right." "Fine," I said coldly. "Pay me the $67,000 you owe me, and I'll drop the suit. You know I don't have that kind of money." "Then we have nothing to discuss." Her mask slipped. Just for a second. And I saw the real Lennox, cold, calculating, dangerous. "Fine," she whispered. "But don't think this is over. I know things about your precious son, things that would surprise you." "What kind of things?" She only smiled. A cruel smile that made my skin crawl. And then she left. That night, I called Terrence. "She says you've kept things from me." What did she mean? There was a pause. A long one. "Mom, there are things I never told you. Things I'm not proud of." My stomach dropped. "What kind of things?" "When Lennox and I were first married, I did some things. Financial things. Not completely legal. I falsified documents to get a better loan rate on our first car. I didn't report some income one year. And when we bought the house, I may have inflated my income on the mortgage application." I sat in stunned silence. I felt sick. "Terrence, why didn't you tell me this?" He lowered his head. "Because I was ashamed. And because Lennox said it was normal, that everyone did things like that. She kept copies of everything. She said it was for our records, but now I realize she was keeping it as insurance. In case I ever tried to leave her." I closed my eyes, finally understanding the full scope of what we were dealing with. Lennox wasn't just manipulative. She wasn't just a greedy spender. She was a criminal who had been systematically compromising my son for years, building a trail of evidence she could use to destroy him if he ever escaped her. Terrence, you need to tell James Crawford about this. Immediately. Mom, if this comes out, I could go to jail. I could lose my job. My professional license. Everything. And if you don't tell him, and Lennox uses it against us in court, you'll lose everything anyway. At least this way, we can control how it comes out. The next morning, I sat in James Crawford's office as my son confessed to his financial crimes. James listened quietly, jotting down notes, asking clarifying questions. When Terrence finished, James leaned back in his chair. "This is serious," he said finally. "But it's not insurmountable. Some of this is past the statute of limitations. The rest can be resolved through voluntary disclosure and penalties." "What about the lawsuit?" I asked. "The lawsuit just got more complicated." "But Bessie, you need to understand something. Your daughter-in-law isn't just trying to avoid paying you back. She's trying to destroy your son's life as punishment for leaving her. This isn't about money anymore. It's about control." As we left James's office, the reality hit me. The real battle was just beginning. Lennox had shown her true colors. She was willing to burn everything and everyone rather than face consequences. But I wasn't the same woman who had opened my door 3 weeks ago. I was stronger now. Angrier. And absolutely determined to protect my son from the monster he had married. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, worn wooden benches, fluorescent lights that made everyone look pale. I sat behind James Crawford's table, hands folded, as Lennox entered with her attorney, Sarah Chin. A sharp woman in her 40s, dressed in power suits that screamed expensive. Lennox looked polished, fresh hair, perfect makeup, a conservative blue dress. She was playing her role, the victimized daughter-in-law. The wronged wife. Terrence sat beside me, nervous but determined. He had already worked with James to disclose his financial irregularities. He might lose his job, but at least Lennox couldn't use it as a weapon anymore. "All rise," the bailiff called, as Judge Patricia Rise entered. Silver hair, stern eyes, the kind of woman who had seen every excuse before. Sarah Chin went first. She painted Lennox as a tragic figure, bullied by a cruel mother-in-law, spied on, forced into debt. "Your Honor," she said sweetly, "my client made some poor financial decisions, yes. But Mrs. Mitchell's response has been vindictive. She's using the courts to interfere in their marriage, to destroy my client emotionally and financially." To anyone listening casually, Lennox sounded like a saint. A young woman who maybe bought a few too many dresses, nothing more. But then James stood. His voice was calm. Steady. Precise. He laid out everything, the $40,000 loan, the missed payments, the illegal house sale, the assault, witnessed by neighbors and police. "Your Honor," James said, "this is not harassment. This is fraud. My client was systematically deceived and robbed by someone who viewed her as an easy mark." Then, he pulled out a card I hadn't expected. "I'd like to call Richard Hawthorne to the stand." A middle-aged man in an expensive suit walked in, face grim. Under oath, Richard admitted the affair. He told the court how Lennox had lied, claiming she was wealthy, divorcing, that she needed help maintaining her lifestyle. He admitted to paying for jewelry, vacations, dinners. She told me her husband was abusive. That his mother was stealing her inheritance, Richard said, refusing to look at Lennox. Lennox's face turned ghost white. Her attorney scribbled furiously. Did you know, James asked, that Mrs. Mitchell was using money from her marital home to fund your relationship? No. If I had known, I never would have participated. And when did this affair end? Last month. My wife discovered it and threatened divorce if I didn't cut it off. By the time Richard stepped down, the courtroom was buzzing. Even Judge Rise looked disgusted. The judge leaned forward. Mrs. Mitchell, do you dispute signing this promissory note? No, Your Honor. Do you dispute failing to pay it for 3 years? No, but... Do you dispute selling the property that secured this loan without repaying it? Lennox's lawyer tried to intervene, but Judge Rise snapped, "Sit down, counselor. I'm asking your client." Lennox stammered. I didn't understand the legal implications. Mrs. Mitchell, you are 32 years old. Are you seriously claiming you didn't know borrowing money meant you had to pay it back? It wasn't supposed to be a real loan. It was family money. The judge's expression hardened. It was a real loan. You signed your name. That's all the law needs. Then came the assault testimony. Neighbors. Police officers. All confirming the truth. Finally, James presented the spending trail, jewelry, spas, the fake boutique. $600,000, gone in half a year. Your Honor, James concluded, this is systematic fraud. Mrs. Mitchell used her husband's money to fund an affair while deliberately avoiding her obligations. The judge recessed briefly. I splashed cold water on my face, barely believing everything that had come out. When court resumed, Judge Rise wasted no time. Mrs. Mitchell, she began, this is one of the clearest cases of fraud I've seen. You borrowed money. You refused to repay it. You sold property illegally. You assaulted the plaintiff. And you attempted to manipulate the system with lies. She turned to her notes. I am ruling in favor of the plaintiff. You are ordered to repay $67,000 within 30 days. Failure will result in wage garnishment and asset seizure. Lennox burst into sobs. But Judge Rise wasn't finished. Furthermore, I am forwarding this to the district attorney for potential criminal fraud charges. This behavior is beyond civil court. Lennox's lawyer tried to argue she had no assets. The judge shut her down cold. Then she should have thought of that before spending $600,000 on jewelry and spa treatments. This court will not reward fraud with sympathy. As we left the courthouse, Lennox hissed at me through her tears. This isn't over. You think you've won, but it isn't over. I looked her dead in the eye. Yes, Lennox. It is. It's been over since the moment you raised your hand to me. 3 months later, Terrence called. Mom. Lennox's friend with the fake boutique? She's been arrested for fraud. Turns out Lennox wasn't her only victim. Will that help us get the money back? Probably not. But it means Lennox might be facing charges too, if they prove she knew. And how are you doing, son? Better, he said. I have a new job. Smaller paycheck, but honest work. A small apartment. Nothing fancy, but it's mine. For the first time in years, I wake up without fearing what disaster Lennox has created. What about the $67,000? I asked gently. I'm paying it back, Mom. Every month. It'll take time, but I'll repay every penny. Terrence, you don't have to. Yes, I do. It's not about the money. It's about proving I'm the man you raised me to be. Months passed. Lennox faced multiple fraud investigations. Richard's wife divorced him. The fake boutique scam unraveled across several states. And me? I found peace. I moved to Arizona, into a quiet retirement community. Mountains on the horizon. A garden of roses outside my door. Terrence visited often. One evening, my neighbor called, "Bessie, someone's at your door." A young woman. She looks upset. My heart skipped. But it wasn't Lennox. It was Jennifer. Her sister. She sat on my patio and told me how Lennox had moved on, under a new name, spinning the same lies, preying on another wealthy man. "I've been trying to warn people," Jennifer said. "But she's so convincing. You're the only person who's ever beaten her. Please, how did you do it?" I poured us tea and told her everything. The investigation. The lawsuit. The documentation. The courage it takes to stand your ground when the world is against you. And I told her the hardest truth of all: you can't save someone from their own choices. You can only protect yourself. That night, under the Arizona stars, I reflected on my journey. Sometimes the battles we never wanted to fight are the ones that define us. Battles against people we love. Battles for principles we thought were too obvious to ever defend. But when those battles come, you only have two choices: fight or surrender everything you've built. I chose to fight. And in fighting, I discovered something incredible. At 64 years old, I was stronger than I had ever imagined. The roses in my garden bloomed, their roots deep in new soil. And like them, I too had survived and thrived. Now I want to ask you, the one listening. Backhand index pointing right, what would you have done in my place? Backhand index pointing right, have you ever faced betrayal from someone you trusted? Share your story in the comments. And before you go, I've left 2 more stories on the screen, stories that will shock you even more. Thank you for listening until the end.